Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into a story that really makes you think about faith and what happens when what you think is enough just isn't. All right, so we're going to be in the book of Matthew, chapter 17, looking specifically at verses 14 through 21. And this passage, it really gets to the heart of a tough question about what faith and spiritual power are all about. So the story kicks off in verse 15, and it's just heartbreaking. You have this father, right? He's on his knees in front of Jesus, absolutely desperate. He's describing how his son is suffering so terribly, throwing himself into fire, into water. You can just feel the anguish. This is his last resort. Now, that word lunatic, it's pretty important to understand the context here. It's not just some throwaway term. Back then, it meant something far beyond what a person could control. A condition so severe, so tormenting, that it was constantly putting this poor boy's life in danger. Okay, so then in verse 16, we get a key piece of information. The father says he'd already taken his son to Jesus' disciples. He went to them first, full of hope. But nothing. They couldn't do it. And this failure, this powerlessness, is what sets the whole stage for a really critical lesson from Jesus. So Jesus shows up in verse 17. And wow, his reaction is intense. It's a sharp rebuke. You can almost hear the frustration in his voice. He's not just talking to his disciples, but to the whole faithless and perverse generation. It's his moment of real disappointment, you know? It's like he's saying, I expected so much more from you all. And just like that, in verse 18, everything flips. Jesus just gives a command, rebukes the devil, and the boy is healed. Instantly, completely. Think about that contrast for a second. The disciples struggled and failed, but for Jesus, it was effortless. The authority he has is just staggering. This is where it gets really interesting. In verse 19, after the crowds have left, the disciples pull Jesus aside. You can imagine they're probably confused, a little humbled, right? And they ask the million-dollar question, why couldn't we do it? And this question, this private moment, is where the story shifts from just a miracle to a deep personal lesson. And Jesus' answer in verse 20? Man, it's so direct. No sugarcoating. He just lays it out there. Because of your unbelief. He tells him straight up, the problem wasn't how strong the evil spirit was. The problem was them. But let's be clear about what unbelief means here. It's not like they had zero faith. It's more like an immature faith. You know that little voice in the back of your head that whispers, is this really gonna work? That's what he's talking about. It's that quiet, lingering doubt. They were still leaning on Jesus being physically there, instead of tapping into their own personal faith. So to explain this, Jesus gives them this amazing visual. He talks about a mustard seed. I mean, it's tiny, right? But it grows into this huge plant. And he's saying that's what faith is like. Even if you have just a tiny little bit of pure, unwavering faith, the kind that doesn't have that nagging doubt, the potential is absolutely massive. And the promise that comes next is just mind-blowing. Nothing shall be impossible unto you. He's telling them that with that kind of pure, doubt-free faith, the impossible literally becomes possible. Moving a mountain stops being just a figure of speech and becomes a symbol for the incredible power that comes with true belief. But hold on, because Jesus isn't done yet. He's about to reveal that there's another layer here. There's a deeper principle they need to grasp, especially for the really tough spiritual battles that are coming their way. And here it is. In verse 21, the final piece of the puzzle. For certain kinds of challenges, the really intense spiritual ones like the one they just faced, faith by itself isn't the whole equation. He tells them it has to be combined with prayer and with fasting. And this is so important. Prayer and fasting aren't just empty rituals. They're powerful tools. See, prayer helps align your heart with God's will. Fasting disciplines your body and helps purify your soul. And when you put them together, that's when you increase your spiritual authority. That's what equips you to face those huge, profound challenges. You have to realize this was a big moment for the disciples. Jesus had mentioned before that they'd fast once he was gone. Well, his time on earth is getting shorter, and now he's teaching them this next-level spiritual practice. It's all about preparing them for what's coming next. So that last line in verse 21 really sums up the entire lesson. This kind goeth not out but by prayer and fasting. The biggest spiritual battles demand the deepest spiritual commitment. And that kind of leaves us with a big question to think about, doesn't it? What are the mountains in our own lives? What are those challenges we're facing that might need more than just simple belief? Maybe they're calling for that deeper level of faith, prayer, and fasting.